What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are breaking down the fantasy prospect of Ezekiel Elliott in 2020 and looking at his potential fantasy outcome. Before we do that, hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this, and also check out our website for a complete list of rankings. You can find that link in the description box below. Anyway, let's take a look at Ezekiel Elliott, beginning with last year's stats. This guy's been the pinnacle of consistency, and really not expecting too much to change heading into 2020. Last year finishes with over 300 carries yet again, 1357 rushing yards, 54 receptions, a little bit of a dip back from the previous year, 420 receiving yards, but a total of 14 touchdowns. And this really right here is pretty close to his floor, assuming a full season of health for Ezekiel Elliott. Now, he is also part of the reason why he's been so consistent is he hasn't missed any significant time for injury. Other than suspension, he really hasn't missed any time at all. Finished last year with third most fantasy points, 311.7 and 19.5 fantasy points per game, but he joins Christian McCaffrey in being one of two running backs to have 15 games as at least a running back too. So color coding here, obviously the light green games end up being the games where he finished in the top 24 at the running back spot. So he had 6 games as a running back too, but he also had 4 games as a top 12 running back and another 5 finishing as a top 6 running back, winning weeks for you there with 26-point games, 31-point games. So not really that much negative to be said about Ezekiel Elliott in terms of his production. We know he's going to get it done for you as long as he's on the field. They're paying him way too much money to take him off, even though he saw his opportunity share dip from about 90% to the high 70% last year with the addition of Tony Pollard. The amount of money that they're paying Ezekiel Elliott doesn't make sense for them to run a committee. I don't think that Mike McCarthy is really going to change up what they're doing. This is more of a Jerry Jones-led thing. Jerry Jones loves Ezekiel Elliott. He wants to see him on the field. He wants fans rooting him on. So Ezekiel Elliott is going to continue seeing an incredibly high snap share as long as he continues to stay healthy. But there are some things to note. He's seen a drop in his efficiency over the course of the past couple of years, pretty much every single year. Last year, he only had 9 breakaway runs, which was 14th in the NFL, and his juke rate was 22.3%, which is only 27th. He didn't really create a lot of yards per touch either. Yards created was pretty low I believe it was 51st in the NFL. He did have some of the most goal line carries, which was definitely a huge factor in the high touchdown total that he had last year. 12 goal line carries, number 3 in the NFL, and 68 red zone touches, which was number 1. Weighted opportunities, 293.6, number 3 in the NFL. Obviously, those goal line carries helping that weighted opportunity number go up. And he also had the 9th most targets, so he's used in both facets of the game. As I mentioned, his opportunity share dropped a bit, but he still finished as number 5 in the NFL with a 77.5% opportunity share. So why do I bring a lot of these efficiency metrics up? Part of the reason that we look at it is, well, if he isn't being as efficient, how much could Travis Frederick's retirement impact? Well, it could impact a little bit. We did already see a season with Travis Frederick out, and the run blocking efficiency of the Dallas Cowboys definitely took a step back. Centers aren't as important as tackles and guards for run blocking, but Travis Frederick definitely made a pretty significant impact for that O-line. So we're not expecting the offensive line to be as efficient this year, but we are expecting the offense to need to continue to, if anything, need to be more efficient this year if they want to actually compete in the NFC because their defense is so atrocious. So we're still expecting a similar opportunity share, if not even more volume, maybe a little bit less efficiency for Ezekiel Elliott into 2020. However, I want to bring this up because there is a strong sentiment, and I agree with it 90% of the time, that you don't need to draft handcuffs early. Handcuffs are something you want to grab later into the season when you're making a playoff run and you don't want to be derailed by a week 14 injury to your star running back. And I definitely understand, and you have to reserve bench spots for players that could potentially break out and have the ability to swap guys out on the waiver wire. So having a handcuff can burn a spot on your roster that may never really turn into anything. So I understand the lack of upside that comes from drafting a handcuff and hanging on to them for the whole year. That being said, in considering the situation for the Dallas Cowboys. The handcuff situation with Tony Pollard is arguably the best situation in the entire NFL. If Ezekiel Elliott goes down, we already saw Tony Pollard in a limited fashion last year. Every time he got a chance to carry the rock, he was even more efficient than Ezekiel Elliott. Now, granted, a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was only on the field a little bit, and when he was on the field, he made the most of his touches. But if Tony Pollard were suddenly to get the same opportunity share that Ezekiel Elliott was, for some reason Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt. I mean, even guys that don't have an injury history, eventually something goes wrong in most players' careers, especially at the running back position, which is such a violent position to play. Injuries can come very quickly. So while we view Ezekiel Elliott and Christian McCaffrey as these guys that are untouchable, we thought the same thing about a guy like Saquon Barkley, and then last year he had a high ankle sprain. So if Tony Pollard ends up taking it over for Ezekiel Elliott because of an injury, Tony Pollard is basically going to be projected to do the exact same thing as Ezekiel Elliott. So the upside to having Tony Pollard, if Ezekiel Elliott is to go down, is incredibly massive. And if you don't have Tony Pollard alongside Ezekiel Elliott, especially this year with the increased volatility, with everything going on with coronavirus, I would want that security. And yes, Ezekiel Elliott is already tested positive for COVID, so maybe that means that he's not going to pose any risk of catching it again, but we don't fully know that from a scientific standpoint, that just because you caught it once doesn't mean you can catch it again. So I think that might honestly give people a little bit of a false sense of security at this point. There's a few running backs in the NFL that if I draft them, I really want their handcuff, because we say it like, oh, well, you only want their handcuff towards the end of the year, but what if Ezekiel Elliott got hurt in week 1? Like last year, Tyreek Hill got hurt in week 1. There's a lot of star players that go down in week 1. If something happens to Ezekiel Elliott in week 1 and you don't have Tony Pollard on your team, you are going to be very, very regretful for that decision. So I love Ezekiel Elliott. He's my number 3 running back, but you have to prepare for something to happen, and I think Tony Pollard is definitely worth a late round pick just to shore up that running back 1 spot, because you're not really going to be, if you have Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott does get hurt, I don't think you're going to be disappointed in the fantasy output that you get. But presuming health, we have basically projecting Ezekiel Elliott to finish right about the same place that he did last year, give him about 1,350 rushing yards, 53 receptions, 423 receiving yards. We have his total touchdowns going up slightly, expecting this offense to have to do a little more with that downgrade to the defense. So we have him finishing as the number 3 running back with 317.7 fantasy points, and definitely has upside if he ends up being involved more in the passing game. Not really expecting it with the addition of CeeDee Lamb. Looks like they're not going to really increase his workload in the passing game, but he could see even more touchdowns if this offense, just if it ends up falling that way, or if they have to continue to score 30 plus points to win every week. Ezekiel Elliott could definitely benefit from that with some massive boom games. So really expecting a great season from Ezekiel Elliott. Again, one of the most consistent players, and that's really what you're looking for when you draft a first round pick. You don't want to take massive risks and shots at upside, because those guys have the best chance of busting. You want to take a guy that has some of the least chance of busting it. And I do think that Ezekiel Elliott's floor is a little bit lower this year. Maybe his ceiling is a little bit lower as well with some of the changes to the offense. But overall, still has the ability to finish as the number 1 running back if for some reason Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley either get hurt or see a regression. Ezekiel Elliott should be right there, taking out that number 1 spot. But even if he doesn't finish as number 1, he should finish as a top 5 running back, which definitely makes him worth a top 5 pick in your fantasy draft. So love Zeke this year, and hope you guys do too. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.